Clean spoken text only. Pronunciation guidance lives in production.md. There is a small bird in your backyard that flirts with death every single night. You have probably seen it. A flash of green at a feeder. A blur of wings, gone before you could point. By day, it is one of the most alive things on Earth. A heart beating more than 1,000 times a minute. Wings blurring dozens of times a second. But when the sun goes down, that same bird does something almost unthinkable. To survive the night, it lets itself fall into a state that looks, for all the world, like dying. This is the story of torpor and of the tiny resurrection that happens at dawn. To understand the night, you have to understand the day. A hummingbird runs one of the highest metabolisms of any animal alive. That speed has a price. To pay it, the bird must eat almost constantly, taking in something like 2 to 3 times its own body weight in nectar and tiny insects every single day. Think about what that means. If you ran on a hummingbird's budget, you would be eating and eating and eating just to stay even. Scaled up to a human, it would be like burning through more than 100,000 calories in a day. Most of that fuel goes straight into motion. The wings beat dozens of times every second. Far too fast for your eye to follow, and the heart races to keep them supplied, more than 1,000 beats a minute when the bird is working hard. Even the calmest moment for a hummingbird is, by our standards, a sprint. And here's the dangerous part. A hummingbird carries almost no reserve. Go just a few hours without refueling, and it can begin to starve. By day, it solves this the only way it can, by feeding again and again every few minutes from dawn to dusk. It is not greed. It is survival, measured out in tiny sips, all day long. But the sun does not wait, and flowers do not glow in the dark. When darkness falls, the hummingbird is trapped by its own body. It cannot feed, and it is tiny, which means it loses heat almost as fast as it makes it. A small, warm body in cold air is like a cup of coffee left on a winter windowsill. The heat just pours out. So the bird faces an impossible arithmetic. To stay warm through a long, cold night at its normal blazing temperature, it would have to burn fuel it simply does not have. By morning, the tank would be empty. It could die in its sleep, not from cold alone, but from the sheer cost of staying warm. Researchers who measured where a hummingbird's energy actually goes found that, even on an ordinary day, a real slice of its budget is spent on nothing but staying warm. Stretch that demand across a freezing night, with no food coming in, and the numbers simply do not balance. The bird cannot win this fight by holding the line. Most animals would be cornered here. The hummingbird found another way out. If it cannot afford to keep the fire burning, it lets the fire go out. This is torpor, and it is nothing like ordinary sleep. The hummingbird deliberately powers itself down. Its metabolism can drop by as much as 95%. That racing heart, more than 1,000 beats a minute by day, slows until it is over 90% quieter, down to a faint, occasional pulse. Its breathing nearly stops. And it gets colder, much colder. A hummingbird's daytime body temperature sits around 40 degrees Celsius, about 104 Fahrenheit, hotter than ours. In deep torpor, that can fall into the single digits. High in the Andes, scientists recorded one species, the black metaltail, letting its body cool to just 3.3 degrees Celsius. It is the lowest body temperature ever measured in any bird or any mammal that does not hibernate. At that point, the bird is barely there. Cold, rigid, unresponsive. If you found it, you would swear it was dead. People often do. They discover a hummingbird hanging stiff from a branch, sometimes upside down, and assume the worst. But it is not dead. It is waiting. Inside that still, cold body, a thin thread of life is still burning, just slow enough, just quiet enough, to last until morning. The bird is feeding on its own stored fat, spending it as slowly as a body can, keeping itself only just warm enough to stay alive. This is the trick that no amount of staying awake could match. By letting go of its heat, the hummingbird can stretch a single evening's fuel across an entire frozen night. Torpor saves the bird's life. But it is a gamble, not a free pass. A bird this deep in shutdown cannot react. It cannot flee. It is, for those hours, completely defenseless, and a motionless hummingbird makes easy prey for anything that finds it in the dark. Down in the lowlands, where predators are many, that risk shapes how deep a bird dares to go. High in the mountains, where few hunters reach, the birds can afford to sink further and stay under longer. And how long they stay depends on the bird. In those Andean studies, scientists tracked more than 24 hummingbirds across several species. High on cold mountainsides, where the night air fell close to freezing, almost every bird went under. Some were in torpor for 5 hours, others for 10 or more. The black meadowtail averaged nearly 11 hours under a giant hummingbird less than 6. Each one runs its own arithmetic. How cold is the night? How much fat is left? How long can I afford to be gone? And torpor is not a single switch. A bird can go shallow or deep, dip under for an hour or sink for the whole night, and tune that choice to the cold and to its own reserves. Curiously, the deeper and longer a bird went, the less weight it lost by morning. The closer it walked to the edge, the more it saved. There is a darker edge to that math. A bird that went into the night too thin, too empty, may not have the reserves to climb back out on time. For them, the gamble runs close to the line. And then, before the sky is even bright, something stirs. The bird does not wait for the sun to wake it. An internal clock, its own sense of time, ticking somewhere deep, begins the climb back about an hour before dawn. No light, no warmth, no signal from the outside world tells it to. Something inside simply knows that the night is nearly spent. That timing matters more than it sounds. A bird that judged the night well rouses early, with fuel to spare. A bird that went into the dark too thin may rouse late, bright at sunrise, or even after it, climbing back to life on the very last of its reserves. But coming back is not as simple as opening its eyes. The body is cold and slow, and it has to be reheated from the inside. So the hummingbird begins to shiver. It vibrates its flight muscles, the same muscles that drive its wings, and that shivering generates heat, warming its blood by several degrees every minute. It is hard, expensive work. Hauling itself back to life burns a real share of everything it saved overnight. The heart speeds up, the breathing deepens. The temperature climbs 10 degrees, 20, 30, back toward that blazing 40. In about 20 minutes, sometimes a little more, a bird that looked dead is warm and alert and ready. And then it does the only thing that matters. It lifts off the twig and goes straight to the nearest flower, because the clock has already started again, and the next night is already coming. So the next time a hummingbird hangs in the air at your window, remember what it carries. Every evening it spends what little it has. Every night it walks its body to the edge of death and waits there in the cold. And every single morning it shivers itself back and chooses to live again. The fastest thing in your backyard, and, quietly, one of the bravest.